Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, let's begin with our story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada. Actually, his story begins, if you want to really begin the story earlier, I was listening to a class by Srila Prabhupada today. It was given on this day in 1969 in Los Angeles, and Prabhupada begins by talking about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the 6 Goswamis and the followers of the Goswamis. And then he goes on to say, but in 250 years after that, the whole Vaishnava Sampradaya fell into disrepute. He said that people would say that the Vaishnava Sampradaya is his words, the sex religion, because of the Prakriti Sahajas who were acting in very immoral ways. He also brought up another group which he really found, but these are different Apasampradayas. So the two he really talked about were the Prakriti Sahajas and the caste Goswamis, or the smarta Brahmins. And he said that these two elements, he said there are 13 altogether, but if I speak about all 13, we'll be here for 13 hours. So he spoke about these two, and he spoke about how Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he appeared in 1838, and he really did a tremendous amount of work renovating the Vaishnava Sampradaya, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism Sampradaya in particular. But that he came to a point in his life that he was really seeing that he couldn't finish this job alone. It was just too much. So he prayed for a ray of Vishnu, and the answer to his prayer was his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, Bimal Prasad was his name at birth, who appeared on February 6, 1874 in Jagannath Puri. And he had all these signs of a great personality. An umbilical cord was wrapped like a Brahman's thread, and 6 months later, the cart of Jagannath stopped in front of Bhaktivedanta Thakur's home, and Bimala Prasad's mother brought him out, and the garland fell from Lord Chaitanya. It really indicated that he was a great personality, indeed a ray of Vishnu. So his childhood is really quite remarkable. It's said that by the age of 7, he had memorized the Bhagavad Gita, and he became an expert at that age in astrology and mathematics. You know, I'm talking about a 7-year-old. And then by the 1880s, when he's like 10, 12 years old, he's helping his father edit his books and journals. And he's also traveling with his father to different preaching engagements. So he's a remarkable child. He's somebody who's, not ordinary, clearly not ordinary. Between 1892 and 1895, he attended the Calcutta Sanskrit College. And there he became so renowned as an astronomer and astrologer that he was offered a seat as a professor of astronomy there. And that seat was kept open permanently. They said, it's for you. And he said, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to engage in spiritual affairs. He said, if you ever change your mind, it's always open. It's always open to you. Because he had written the treatise Surya Siddhanta, which really is a masterpiece in astronomy/astrology. So he was a remarkable scholar, and he was given the name Siddhanta Saraswati when he was at that college because of his great scholarship. So now no longer Bimala Prasad, but Siddhanta Saraswati. And he was employed for 10 years. And you may have seen pictures of this. He was employed as a personal tutor of the children of the king of Tripura, which is eastern province of India, way over almost by Burma. And you may have seen pictures of Bhaktisiddhanta, where there's this kind of like pudgy-looking guy with a mustache and a big turban. And this is the king of Tripura. And he taught the prince and the other students there different subjects, including the family history, the art of being a king. He also taught the duties and focus of spiritual life. It got a little uncomfortable there as he was teaching a little too much spiritual life. And by 1905, that was it. He had disconnected himself from that. In 1897, he did start his own Sanskrit school, and he published articles, and this really is where he established himself as a great Sanskrit scholar. So, this is his early life, and if we think of it, it's not so much different than Nimai Pandit. I mean, he's a devotee. He's definitely a devotee. But he's not really teaching so much, or going out and preaching and spreading the movement. He's working with his father. He's editing books. He's teaching Sanskrit. He's an astrologer. He's an astronomer. He's teaching the king's sons. But he still hasn't launched into his spiritual life. That begins in 1900. In 1900, his father says, you have to get initiated. You see, the father can't give diksha to his son. So he said, you have to get initiated. And, here's Saraswati, Siddhanta Saraswati. He's the topmost intellectual scholar anywhere. And his father is also a scholar. But his father has a friend named Gorkishore Das Babaji. He's a friend. Gorkishore Das Babaji is his Siksha disciple, but he's also a friend. Gorkishore Das Babaji would come over to Bhaktivedanta Thakur's house sometimes. And one time he actually came up all dressed up like a household. You usually dress like a Babaji. And Bhaktivedanta Thakur said, well, why are you doing this? He says, well, I'm coming to a householder's house. I should look like one, right? He was a very unusual person. He was not a scholar. Some people say he was illiterate. I think he wasn't totally illiterate. He was not a Sanskrit scholar. Couldn't read Sanskrit. So he was the exact opposite of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. So Bhaktivedanta said, go meet him. You've got to take initiation. So he goes and meet him, and he asks him, my father wants me to take initiation from you. And Gorkishore Das Babaji says, forget it. I don't initiate. I mean, you have to realize that this is a man who spends his time chanting his japa in a latrine because he so much just wants to be away from people. He doesn't want to involve himself in any sort of activities outside of just focused on Krishna consciousness. So Siddhanta Saraswati begs, and he says, okay, I'll ask Lord Chaitanya. So the next week he comes back, and he says, well, what did Lord Chaitanya say? I forgot to ask. So he comes back, and the next week he meets him on a bridge, and he says, what did Lord Chaitanya say? Oh, I didn't ask again. So, and then at that point, Siddhanta Saraswati is completely beside himself. He goes back to his father and says, he's not going to initiate me. And his father says, yes, he is, or you have to leave the house. I mean, that's it. You're going to take initiation from him. So the next week, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, Siddhanta Saraswati goes up to see Gorkishore Das Babaji, and they're on the same bridge. He says, if you don't initiate me, I'm throwing myself off the bridge. I guess that was what it took. So Gorkishore Das Babaji agreed to initiate him. And if you read some of the commentaries or comments that Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur writes about his guru, I have learned everything about spiritual life from my guru. So it's not like he's learning something in an academic way. He's learning something deeper than that. He's learning about love of Krishna, and it's transmitted from a pure devotee to his heart. So this begins his real focus on spiritual life. In 1905, he takes up this vow that I'm going to chant 1 billion names of God. Well, you know, if you do the math, it takes 9 years to do that. That's like 192 rounds a day for 9 years. You'll get to 1 billion. That's 1,000 million. That's a lot of rounds, a lot of names. So during this time, he was like, he wasn't completely idle. He was also doing work excavating Lord Chaitanya's birthplace at the yoga pit. So he was chanting all this japa, but he was doing other things too. So he was engaged in an intense sort of spiritual life. And this is all meant to get him ready for the big, big spiritual adventure that's going to happen later in his life. So he finishes, and when he doesn't do anything in his life, he's living very simple. He has leaks in his roof, he just uses an umbrella. He doesn't fix anything, he's not trying to engage in any sort of other activity but chanting this japa and restoring the Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. 1911, there's a big meeting that happens, and this meeting is a meeting between the Smartas and the Gaudiyas. And in this meeting, they're going to try to determine who's better, who's greater, the Brahmanas or the Vaishnavas. Well, Bhaktivedanta Thakur is supposed to speak, but Bhaktivedanta Thakur, he was very ill. He was actually towards the end of his life. He was in a state where he was already gone to his bhajan kriya, but he was just in his bhajan at the time. So he sent his son. And what was remarkable is that Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he gave a long, long talk. And in that talk, he praised the Brahmanas to the point where the Brahmanas were thinking, he's finally got it. He knows that we're the best. And then he turns around and says, however, these smart Brahmins don't really understand the real purpose of life. That's only understood by the Vaishnavas. And everybody erupts into like cheering, and they want to take his, dart. He want to touch his feet, and this kind of a riot happens, And the Brahmins are not happy, and they don't forget, because they don't forget. And then we find in the next decade, he deals with some very bad elements in this smart Brahmin camp. A couple of very horrible things happened to him. Well, they happened to everybody, and they were bad. In 1914, his father, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, he passes away, and it leaves him very bereft and spiritually depressed, so to speak. But in the following year, about 18 months later, in late 1915, his guru passes away. And there were, his guru was a very unusual man, as we know. And one of the things he said is that, just drag my body through the street after I'm gone. I mean, who cares? So there were a whole bunch of pundits, pandas, sannyasis who are all there vying for the quote honor of doing this, and ultimately they wanted to somehow or other use Gorkashore Das Babaji's holy body as a way to make money. Well, anyway, Siddhanta Saraswati, he's only a brahmachari this time. He's not even a sannyasi. He just stands up and says, I'm the only one. I'm his only disciple. You're not going to do this. I know his wishes, and this is not what he wanted. And he said, and I'll challenge you. If any one of you has not had any illicit connection, sexual connection in the last year, you're disqualified. And so some people left. Last month, last week, everybody left because they're all bogus. And then, the last rites were done by Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. And he interred Gorkashore Das Babaji on the banks of the Ganges, but that place was disturbed by the Ganges. He had to be reinterred across the other side of the Ganges later. So on March 29, 1918, it's a huge day for Saraswati, Siddhanta Saraswati. That day, he took sannyas in his unusual way to take sannyas. The way he took sannyas was he sat in front of a picture of his guru and chanted the mantras and picked up the danda and declared himself Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. He just did it. He just took up that mantle. And that same year, he begins the Gaudiya Math. And this Gaudiya Math is a revolutionary spiritual force. Nothing like it ever before. You have to understand that all Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the whole history was really not very well organized. It was simple maths, different places. It was not a unified movement. But Bhaktisiddhanta, he changed that. And his goal was to, and he did, open 64 branches of the Gaudiya Math. And he did establish tirthas everywhere throughout India where Lord Chaitanya visited. And he did start publishing magazines and newspapers. He had the Harmonist, he had the daily newspaper, Dainika Nadia Prakash. He was asked, how can you possibly publish a newspaper every day about God? He said, well, it's a whole lot more happening in the spiritual world than there is here. It's unlimited, and here it's quite limited. Anyway, so he starts a lot of Braj Mandala parikramas during this decade. But this is where we're going to start talking about Srila Prabhupada, because you may not know this, but Prabhupada only met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta 4 times. 4 times. Now, many of his disciples were with him every day for 20 years, living in the Math, preaching with him. And Prabhupada, our Prabhupada, 4 times. It's not how much, it's the quality and the connection we have with Guru. So anyway, it's 1922, Prabhupada, our Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, he's just married, Abhay Charan Day. And he has a friend, Narendra Malik. And Narayan says, Abhay, you gotta come. I just saw this incredible sannyasi. He's preaching really amazingly. And really, Abai didn't really want to hear much about this, because his father was a very good Vaishnava, a pure devotee. But he also invited a lot of, any sadhu who came by, he would invite. So there were ganja smokers and, people who weren't very, So, Abai thought, oh, come on. I've seen these people before. I just don't want to. He said, but Naren said, you got to come and see him. So they went to one Utal Road, a rented place, and then they came up to the rooftop. And they come in and they pay their obeisances. And no sooner had they actually risen up from their obeisances, as Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur says, why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the world? You're educated young men. You can do it. And Prabhupada, Abai is like, what? Remember, these are pastimes. Because both Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur are eternal associates of the Lord in Vrindavan. But when they appear here in the material world, they have their pastimes. And they're meant to teach us. And they're meant to show us, how we should be striving for spiritual life. So Abai could hardly believe what he just heard. They hadn't even exchanged any ideas or anything. And he's sitting face to face with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he's trying to get his thoughts together. And the first thing he thinks about, he says to Bhaktisiddhanta, who's going to hear our message? Who's going to hear Lord Chaitanya's message? We're a dependent country. First, India must become independent. We're under the thumb of the British. Other places, they're like China and Japan, they have great cultures, and they're not colonies of another country. Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur is really unflustered by all this. He just says, he said, a deep Krishna consciousness, it didn't have to wait. He says, Krishna consciousness doesn't have to wait for a change of Indian politics, nor is it dependent on who rules. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, that it can't wait. Anywhere it has to be preached. So Prabhupada says, this is a quote from Prabhupada, I was from a Vaishnava family, so I could appreciate what he was preaching. Of course, he was speaking to everyone, but he found something in me, and I was convinced about his argument and mode of presentation. I was so much struck with wonder. I could understand, here's the proper person who can give a real religious idea. Walking away from the ashram, Naren turned to his friend, to Abai, and said, so what do you think? He is wonderful, said Abai. The message of Lord Chaitanya is in the hands of a very expert person. Srila Prabhupada says, later, I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately. Not officially, but in my heart. I was thinking that I had met a very nice saintly person. That's 1922. Now, during the 1920s, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, one of his main focuses is to fight against this Smarta Brahman idea. Caste Goswamis, people who think that the ritual is most important, that you have to be born in a Brahmin family in order to engage in real spiritual life. So part of his strategy was to take huge Parikrama parties around Braj, and also around around Mayapur. And he met with huge resistance in these parties. There's many stories about the resistance. One story was that there was such a dangerous situation with persons threatening Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, that one of his very dear disciples, Keshava Maharaj, who was Prabhupada's sannyas guru, Keshava Maharaj went into a room with Bhaktisiddhanta, and there they switched their outfits so that Bhaktisiddhanta could slide out the back door, and Keshava Maharaj went out into the crowd dressed as Bhaktisiddhanta because they looked the same physique, and risked his life for his guru. Not unlike the famous Koresh with Ramanujacharya. These are great devotees. And this is a dangerous time because Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur is just insistent on establishing, the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Prabhupada speaks about this. It's also to be noted that Srila Prabhupada, during this time, from 22 to 32, he doesn't see Bhaktisiddhanta directly. However, many of his disciples, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's sannyasi disciples, visit him in Prayag, where he has a pharmacy. And they actually established the Prayag branch of the Gaudiya Math with the help with donations and financial support by Abai, Charan Day. So Prabhupada's involved. He's not seeing Bhaktisiddhanta directly, but he's involved. And Prabhupada speaks about all this because he had long conversations with his guru at other times. And here's what Prabhupada says about those days in the 1920s. My Guru Maharaj's contribution is that he defeated the caste Goswamis. He defeated Brahmanism. He did it the same way as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Kibra Vipra Kiba Nyasi Shudra Keninoy Ye Krishna Tattva Veta Se Guru Hoy. There is no consideration whether one is a sannyasi, a brahmana, a shudra, or a grihasta. No, anyone who knows the science of Krishna, he is all right. He's a Goswami and he is a brahmana. Anyone who's qualified. But no one else taught that since Lord Chaitanya. This was my Guru Maharaj's contribution. And for this reason, he had to face so many vehement protests from these Brahmana caste Goswamis. Once they conspired to kill him. My Guru Maharaj told me personally, by his grace, when we used to meet alone, he used to talk about so many things. He was so kind that he used to talk with me, and he personally told me that these people wanted to kill me. They collected 25,000 rupees and went to bribe the police officer in charge of the area, saying, you take these 25,000 rupees, we shall do something against Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and you don't take any steps. He could understand, the police chief, could understand that they wanted to kill him. So the police officer frankly came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and said, of course, we do accept bribes, and we indulge in such things, but not for a sadhu, not for a saintly person. I cannot dare. So the police officer had more spiritual understanding than these so-called brahmanas. So the police officer refused and said to my Guru Maharaj, you take care, this is the position. So vehemently they protested. When my Guru Maharaj was present, even big scholars, they were afraid to talk even with his beginning students. My Guru Maharaj was called living encyclopedia. That's because he could remember everything he ever read. He read something when he was 10 years old, he could remember it when he was 60. He could talk with anyone on any subject. He was so learned. And no compromise. So-called saints, avatars, yogis, everyone who was false was an enemy to my Guru Maharaj. He never compromised. some godbrothers complained that this preaching was a chopping technique and it would not be successful. But those who criticized him fell down. Good lesson. Okay, is now two more meetings two meetings that Srila Prabhupada had with Bhaktisiddhanta. It's 1932. Prabhupada's still in Prayag. He still's got his pharmacy. But he's heard that there's a big parikrama going on in Vrindavan. So he's determined he's going to go to Vrindavan and join the parikrama, at least for a few days. It's hard for him to get away. He's got to work. So here's Prabhupada speaking about coming to that place. So I met them in Koshi, outside of Mathura. And Keshava Maharaj was informing that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is going to Mathura tomorrow morning, and he will speak Harikatha this evening. Anyone who wants to may remain, or otherwise, they may go to see Sheshashayi Vishnu. So at that time, I think only 10 or 12 men remained. Sridhar Maharaj was one of them. That's B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, who later on lived with Prabhupada for 6 years after the demise of the Gaudiya Math. And I thought it was wise. What can I see at Sheshashayi? Let me hear what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati will speak. Let me hear. When Abai arrived, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was already speaking. An hour went by, 2 hours, because you know he would speak for 5 hours. Then already, the already small gathering in Bhaktisiddhanta's room gradually thinned. A few sannyasis left, excusing themselves to tend to duties connected with the parikrama camp. Only a few leaders remained. Abai was the only outsider. Of course, he was a devotee, not an outsider, but in the sense that he was not a sannyasi, was not handling any duties, and was not even initiated, and was not traveling with the parikrama, but had only joined for a day. In that sense, he was an outsider. The philosophy Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was speaking over was democratically open to whoever would give an ardent hearing. And that Abai was doing, he was listening. A little more than a month later, so this is in October. This happens. We don't have the exact dates, but it's October 1932. So a little more than a month later, Srila Prabhupada hears again that Bhaktisiddhanta is going to be, he can see Bhaktisiddhanta, and this time it's right in his hometown, in Allahabad. A little more than a month later, Abai was again anticipating an imminent meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, this time in Allahabad, Prayag. When Abai learned that there will also be an initiation ceremony, he asked if he could be initiated. Atulananda, who was the Math president, assured Abai that he would introduce him to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati recognized him and was visibly pleased to see him. He already knew him. He said, yes. He said, exchanging looks with Abai, he likes to hear. He does not go away. I have marked him. I will accept him as my disciple. Haribo. So later on, there's the initiation ceremony. And now Abai Charan Day is ready to be initiated. After offering prostrated obeisances, Abai extended his right hand and accepted the strand of japa beads. This is some hours later, or a day later, I think, from the hand of his spiritual master. At the same time, he also received the sacred brunical thread, signifying second initiation. Usually Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave the first initiation, Harinam, and only after some time, when he was satisfied with the progress of the disciple, would he give the second initiation. But he offered Abhay both initiations at the same time, because he was qualified. Now Abhay was a full-fledged disciple, a Brahmana, who could perform sacrifices such as this fire yagna for initiation. He could worship the deity in the temple and would be expected to discourse widely. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta added Aravinda, lotus, to his name. Now he was Abhay Charanaravinda Prabhu. Soon, later, to be Swami. So, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's put this in perspective. Things don't look good as we're getting towards into the 30s at in the Gaudiya Math. There's trouble brewing. There's factions. They're fighting over things. They've got this big temple, Bhag Bazaar in Calcutta. There's a lot of strife about what's going to go on with that. And it's really become, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur is really disturbed, and it's understood that he's disturbed. So Prabhupada at this time, Srila Prabhupada, he's moved from Prayag to Bombay. His business is not going well, and so he moved to Bombay. And one of the things that said, some of his associates who knew him said, he wasn't into his business at all. All he wanted to do was talk about Krishna. Because Prabhupada knew he had more to do than to simply sell medications. So in November 1935, our Srila Prabhupada met with his spiritual master in Vrindavan. It was Kartik season again, and good time to visit the Vrindavan. And Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur was staying with his disciples for a month at Radhakund. And Srila Prabhupada said he was lamenting that these men are simply after the stones and bricks of the building he condemned. He was very, very sorry. So this is the famous, you've seen the picture. They go for a walk around Radhakund, and the little Vrindavan is tagging along. And Srila Prabhupada relates this conversation. He says, when we were living in a rented house, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely at Ultadunga. We were happier then. But since we have been given this marble palace at Bhag Bazaar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Haribol. Abhay felt his spiritual master speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or warning him to avert a disaster. But what could he do? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said directly to Abhay, Amar Icha Chila Kicha, Kichu by Karana. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radhakund and beholding his spiritual master, our Srila Prabhupada felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. Hare Krishna. Here's the beginning of Prabhupada's movement. Okay, now there's one last exchange they have. It's not a personal exchange. Prabhupada is in Bombay, 1936, December. Bhaktisiddhanta was in poor health at Jagannath Puri, and Abai was in Bombay, and he wanted to write to his Guru Maharaj a letter. He is a little kind upon me, Prabhupada thought. He will understand my request. And he began to write. This is our Srila Prabhupada writing Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur. Please accept my humble obeisance at your lotus feet. You have got many disciples, and I am one of them. But they are doing direct service to you. Some of them are brahmacharis, some of them are sannyasis, but I am a householder. I cannot. Sometimes I give monetary help. While I cannot give you direct service, is there any particular service I can do? 2 weeks later, this is like just before Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur leaves the planet. Abai receives a reply. I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher, the blessings of the spiritual master here. If you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general as well as philosophers. This is the beginning of this time, right here. I mean, this is actually, this is Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur impregnating our Gurudev. My Gurudev. Everyone's Gurudev. With the power to spread this movement. With the power to go across the ocean and have 2 heart attacks and go to New York with only a little bit of money in your pocket and start a movement. This is the beginning. I'm going to speak briefly a little postscript here. We're looking at 1938. It's a year after it's a little more than a year after Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur is married. And the Gaudiya Math is really in trouble. It's divided between 2 personalities. One is a great preacher, and actually Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur's choice to be the next Acharya. And the other is the great treasurer businessman who kept the whole thing going. And they are at odds. About 2/3 of the Gaudiya Math want to follow the preacher, the big sannyasi, and about 1/3 want to follow the manager. But the problem is, the manager's got all the money, and he forces the whole thing into court. And in court, this manager uses some very, very ugly strategies to get the court, blasphemous things he says about his own guru, to get the court to rule that he gets 2/3 of the property while the sannyasi gets only 1/3. Still, the sannyasi had all the followers, but he falls down. He leaves, gets married, he's gone. And at that point, the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur breaks into little moths all over the place. Srila Prabhupada, at this point, he's feeling so lost in one sense, but he's also so grateful. He's never been part of either party. He's his own man. He's independent. And he has a friend, B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, who completely separates himself from both parties and opens his own math in Mayapur. But Prabhupada is again living in Calcutta, and Sridhar Maharaj, he wants to have a center in Calcutta, so he moves in with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, they live together for 6 years, and they do programs together. And Prabhupada, who's very, very, gung-ho. And Sridhar Maharaj never was gung-ho, he's very bookish. He's telling Sridhar Maharaj, let's go to talk to Gandhi, and let's talk to Nehru, and let's spread the movement. But Sridhar Maharaj never really had the chutzpah to do that. But they did work together to really preach. And this was the beginning of Prabhupada's, getting his feet wet, preaching and starting programs. And it's just what we do today. We have programs in association. The Hare Krishna movement goes on and on and on. It takes different shapes, different forms. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur and our Srila Prabhupada, what a wonderful pair of pure devotees who have delivered Krishna consciousness to the whole world. So we're so grateful to be able to celebrate this wonderful appearance day of my Guru Maharaj's Guru. And also celebrate how Srila Prabhupada had so much mercy from his Guru, and how he spread this Krishna consciousness movement all over the world, and how it's still spreading today under his wing, because he's a pure devotee. He's a one in a million pure devotees. They don't come around very often like Srila Prabhupada. We're so fortunate. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.